had a breakthrough in my learning to play this week. And as with so many of my lessons regarding this, it came from a voice lesson. So a little tidbit about me. I'm super interested in our brain and our body and trauma and how it affects our ability to have an imagination, to be creative, and to be able to play, because it affects those things, right? And so in my voice lesson this week, she was talking about when we hold our breath for a long note, it's similar to when we're underwater holding our breath. We can't breathe. And so when we can't breathe, our body goes into fight, flight, or freeze mode. And it's the same thing when we're singing. We're holding a note. We literally can't breathe because we're expelling air and our body wants to freak out. It just became so obvious to me. Like, I understand these things in other contexts, but this is the first time it clicked for me in the context of singing. And it made me realize that so much of my stuff about singing is rooted in such a wounded place that it's like almost like an identity rather than a brain and body connection to like physically and mentally work through in sort of the same way I would work through trauma in therapy. Let me try to make it even more clear. I was raised by an abusive, malignant narcissist. I have had to do a lot of trauma healing, EMDR, hypnotherapy, just the works. And there are wounds that I have from my home of origin. And before I started working on healing those wounds, or even in the early process of healing those wounds, whenever something would come up in life and those wounds were activated, I would have a huge nervous system response. Anxiety, massive depressive episodes. I have trichotillomania. I would pull my hair just from those wounds being activated. Having gone through a lot of work with that, those wounds do still get activated because I believe that healing is lifelong and like our stories are always a part of us. The goal isn't to not get activated. We're going to get activated. The goal is to manage those activations. So now when something happens that activates an old wound, I feel it in my body, but I recognize what's happening. And I have developed the tools over the years to be able to work through it. For example, wound activated, I recognize that it's activated. I still feel it in my body. I still feel the heaviness of that energy, but it doesn't control my life. I've learned to go for a walk. I've learned to do yoga. I process it through my body as I'm also working through it cognitively because I've learned the truths that combat the wounds that I have. So through all of this work that I've done over the years to heal that trauma, I'm able to pass through any activation because it is a brain and body connection. It is the same thing with singing. I have all of these old wounds around my voice. And up until this week, I have been operating like this is a wound. But when she was like, it's a nervous system response, it clicked. I'm like, this is the same sort of work, but doing it in an embodied creative space. And it's not an identity of like, oh, I'm this wounded person who hasn't been able to use her voice, which is true and very valid. And that wound is still going to come up. But now it's like, I can develop the same sort of tools to heal that wound in order to do the physical things that I need to do to sing. And that makes me want to cry. Because that all of a sudden makes a lot of things feel way more possible than they ever did. Let's go. Let's do it.